So we're gathered here in Adrian Newstead's gallery in Bondi Beach, and it's a Gordon Syron retrospective, and the title is called Syron's War. And these two gentlemen have come to join us to talk about all sorts of different topics, and around us are Gordon's paintings. This one's called Invasion Day, and the Aboriginal Ballerina, all the different ones. And sitting here with two of our patrons of our museum collection, The Keeping Place, and they've been wonderful patrons for so many years. This is Reverend John Queripel, and Pastor, I should have said Pastor John Queripel, and Reverend Ray Minniecon from Redfern. And they're really the most amazing friends as well for so many years of Gordon and myself.
If I talk too much, you might call me the never end.
Well, I say that because a lot of people love both of you and respect and care about you and your well-being. And when I say you were patrons, well, we've decided to sell the Keeping Place collection and not try to reopen our museum. And so we're going to make a book about it. Put all the artworks in it, put the story in it, and it'll ask the question, why isn't there an Aboriginal museum in Australia anywhere? Why isn't there one but Gordon had the dream to open this museum because there wasn't one that has national artworks from all over. And it didn't include the Torres Strait Islanders because they have their own museum. That opened in 1988. So he wanted a freestanding museum with Aboriginal curators and Aboriginal security guards and the board, and to be owned by Aboriginal people. So they could show which artworks talked about the massacres or whatever, and truth-telling. So I'll just ask Reverend Ray first to speak, and then I'm sure Pastor John will want to speak. So,
You're first.
Why isn't there an Aboriginal museum in Australia that has national artworks?
In one word, it's called racism.
Ooh.
The country is so sophisticated in its racist attitudes towards Indigenous Australians, which I can't fathom. And I've asked this question many times, even of our churches. You know, why do you, white fellas, hate us so much? What did we do? What crime did we commit? What sin did we commit that you would hate us so much? No one can answer that question, and we're still trying to fathom it. And in the process of that, of trying to understand why, I mean, it's just not only these kinds of things, but there's so many other things that aren't put in place for us to celebrate our culture in our own country, in our own land. There is none of these things. It's like we have to go with cap in hand and beg in our own land for a piece of land to actually do the things that we would like to do. So at the end of the day, when all the discussions and all the debates are finished, it still comes back to that one word, racism, at the most sophisticated international level in this country. You can't get away from it. I can't escape it. It's just there.
Yeah, I don't know how I can follow on from that. I have to say, the collection is incredible. This is just, this gallery is just a tiny bit of it. You'd have to have a massive building to display it all, because there's not only Gordon's work, there's Elaine's photography, which is a historical record of the Black Rights movement in Australia. And there's other artists that Gordon managed to swap pieces with. There's just a huge lot of it. I have to tell a story. When I first ran into Gordon and Elaine, I was told there's this keeping place, and it was at Redfern. It was in a railway shed at Redfern. And I went over there, and lo and behold, there's a big gate there. It's an industrial area. So I couldn't climb over that gate even though I was younger those days, but I just yell out, "Gordon Syron!" And the third time I yelled it out from 100 metres away, bloke comes out, that must be him. I went over and looked at that place. It was the most incredible place. It just blew your mind. There were paintings everywhere, stashed away in here, rolled up and shoved into there. There were, I don't know, must have been thousands of them, I think. My main thought was, one match dropped on this floor, because it's been a railway shed, so it's been grease and grime and everything on the floor. There would go a huge lot of the Aboriginal art collection in Australia. But there should be, a keeping place. I'm glad to see in this exhibition there's plannings are going out to the National Gallery of Victoria, I think the National Gallery itself in Canberra. You've got the National Museum in Canberra. There are some other places I think you've got as well. That's good, but there really needs to be a recognition. And there's just, as Ray said, there's a refusal to come to terms with it. And Gordon's paintings are not the ones you buy because they go with the colour of the curtains. Definitely not. They are provocative, which is great, but that provocation is still too much for institutionalised Australia. But it needs to be seen, it needs to be placed somewhere where people would see that. My vision would be actually where the white fellas first came. Ashore would be in Port Phillip Bay, not Port Phillip, Botany or Sydney. That's where it needs to be. But we've had some big people backing it, big names, but still has not happened. And that to me is a tragedy in our history that hasn't become a reality, and it should have become a reality.
And going on from that, I mean, the Redfern Yard was about the closest that Gordon and Elaine got to having a building that would house our stuff. And then they closed them down.
Robert Dome was mayor of Sydney.
Who?
Robert Dome.
Oh,
He was
right.
before Clever Moore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's going back that far. Because Clever's been there a long time. Robert Dome was, I think, 2007.
No, Robert Don was in the Redfern. He wasn't the mayor. He
Yeah,
was.
but
There was two councils then, I think.
I think it was.
Yeah, there was.
After
He was a part of the Redfern,
The redevelopment of
yes,
Bondi.
the gentrification of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's when he came.
He created the Redfern Authority.
That's it, the Redfern.
They're the ones that kicked us out.
I can mention some of the names that were on board.
The building's still there.
Michael Kirby, Philip Ruddock.
Honourable.
We had the former Governor of New South Wales, now just sadly deceased, Marie Bashir. There was and Larissa
Professor
Larissa had all sorts of people on. So I was one of the patrons. I was, in the small print and the extras in the film. But
Robert Tigner?
Robert, these are significant people in Australian politics and public life, but it just never could happen. Now the contrast is if you go to New York, and I think it's about Fifth Avenue, there's a huge museum of the, I don't know exactly what they call it because
Native American.
I think it's Native American is there, and it's about 4 or 5 floors of stuff. That's a contrast. That's if Donald hadn't closed it down yet, but that's a contrast, and we can't do something like that here. It's a negation of the reality of life and the culture of this land. And we'll never live in Australia, as a white fellow I can say, we'll never live in Australia until we come to terms with that we're not the first here. And we've been responsible for committing a long injustice, and call it for what it will, and that term is refusing to be used at other places. It's genocide. There was a deliberate attempt. You can read it. It's in papers and documents to eradicate the Aboriginal race, or at least the best to homogenise them into the dominant white narrative by inbreeding, or the terms they used in those days.
Yeah, Uncle Gordon's artwork hits me at three levels. One, it's the personal level. The other is the political level, and the other is the prophetic. And personally, you can't see this artwork without being challenged personally about the story that it's portraying. It hits you right there in the guts. It's political because everything that's in this artwork is political. It's about a political story, a political history, but it's also prophetic because it's saying that if we don't change the ways in which this country is going, then this is the story politically. There is no future unless we see our people being imprisoned, and it's worse now than it's ever been, especially when you get taken children at the age of 10 and incarcerated them. It's so deliberate. That's why I call it racism. It's deliberate racism. You can't get away from it. And so this is political in terms of that. And if there is another word that I would use, there is a spirituality about Uncle's paintings, deep spirituality here, that makes it the much more powerfully prophetic. And it's a yearning for some justice, some way forward, some resolution to our history and our story. And it's never going to come while there's still redcoats, while there's still prison bars, while there is still Aboriginal soldiers not being recognised, while there is still these kind of images of a dancing Aboriginal girl as a ballerina who we'll never ever see on the stages of our opera house. So yes, we need this artwork. We need this artwork because it tells our stories in such a profoundly prophetic way. And yes, it does confront us, but you can see the juxtapositions here within this artwork. It's very, this story against this story. And that juxtaposition is getting wider and wider now. And so we yearn as Aboriginal people. I yearn as an Aboriginal person when I'm confronted with this stuff for justice.
I mean, it's the provocative is the word I come to all the time, and that's a good word. Good art is provocative, and there's the spirituality that Ray's talking about. It's an inverted spirituality. It's taking what is the symbols of church and state the Redcoat churches, I think Gordon would say, it's in all his paintings anyway, that's emptied out spirituality in Australia. And has abstracted us from the land, from the environment, from the ecology. And these are massive theological issues now. How do we live with land and how do we live with the ecology? But Gordon's work subverts spirituality as it's been understood. The Redcoat Church, and calls us back to a fuller spirituality, and in very provocative, the symbol of Christ on the cross. I'll have a piece where Christ is black and she's a woman. That's really provocative, and it's not cheap. There's nothing cheap about it. It's raising, driving us toward a intensely important question of what does Christ, who'd been so co-opted by the establishment, what is the original Jesus on about? And Rome didn't crucify you for being a nice person. Rome, you got crucified by the Romans for being a ratbag, for being a threat, for being a challenge. And I think there's some sort of crucifixion of Gordon's work because it hasn't been recognised. For what it could be. I think it's starting to be. The only thing I hope is it's not nicely co-opted into a nice story. I think Gordon would come back, and I know he did a bit of boxing in his time, he'd come back and hit him if they start doing that.
Yeah, but when I see that crucifixion, I see me on that cross.
Yeah.
And my people.
Yeah.
That's us.
Gordon's painting was called Gender of God, asking the question, what gender was God, and what color was he, and was he pink, or was he black, or was he white? And it's a series. So it's several paintings.
Yeah, now that's the provocative nature of what Gordon's painting does to us. And it's not about a question anymore for me, it's about when do we start the dialogue around these things. Because I can ask the questions after questions, but I think we're beyond that if we're a sophisticated country, so-called. I was born, like with Uncle Bondi, on the other side of 1967 referendum. And so we know what it was like to be under that kind of scrutiny all the time and under that kind of control and power. We couldn't even get out of the community, out of our mission till after 6 o'clock. Well, after 6 o'clock, it was just impossible. You picked up and you put in you just abused every day. And even after the 2023 referendum, what we have noticed, I have noticed and others have noticed too, is this increase in racial attitude. It's like it's been legitimised now. That you can now be racist towards Aboriginal people and you will not be charged for that. That's where we're at. That even by being black, it's a crime against the state, the empire.
You did raise the word dialogue, and that's exactly why we need a keeping place. Because that would be where the dialogue would take place. And it'd be great to see people go in there and be outraged. Nothing wrong with a bit of outrage. But it would be dialogue. It'd be challenging people. It would be, and not only challenging people, it would be supporting other people, mainly Aboriginal people, others that are marginalised in our society. So it'd be a place where we could meet and have this crucially important dialogue, which we must have in Australia. Until we have that dialogue, we're just not going to create any shared future, any fuller future together, because we become a lesser nation. And we became a lesser nation, of course, in 2023 with that terrible rejection of something which was so conservative, recognised in the Constitution Aboriginal people. I mean, what's the controversy in that? And yet the rat bags ran with it and it got rejected. Fear-mongering, all sorts of things. It was one of the darkest days in Australia's history, the rejection of that. Very obviously it should have been passed.
As a voice.
Referendum. Yeah. The voice, yeah, the voice. Yeah.
And Linda Burney was wonderful.
But crucified.
But that's the nature of being of our people, is that we are people of grace. We're people of spirit. Doesn't matter how much you crush us, we're still people of grace and honour and dignity. And we'll always respond with that. If you look at the reconciliation process, which is a huge, big challenge, even the word reconciliation is still a big challenge for us, because we've never started with a good relationship anyway, so how can we talk about reconciliation? Conciliation perhaps, but not reconciliation. But see, even in that process, if you look at the situation, from my eyes anyways, it's always the Aboriginal people who will be putting their hands out.
Mm.
You know, the reconciliation process was designed by us out of the Royal Commission of Black Deaths in Custody. It was just one of those recommendations that we recommended. It didn't come from the state, didn't come from Empire, it came from us.
Nor the voice, of course.
Nor the voice. So we've always been putting out our hands and saying, come on, let's be reconciled in this country. Because we know what the alternative is.
It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe it was rejected. It was so easy just to say yes.
Yeah, I know. But for me, it was fait accompli. You sort of hope for the best, but you always get the worst.
And this is where Gordon's art is important.
It's there.
It challenges us, it matures us, because we need to, speaking as a white fellow, need to mature in our understanding. And that's going to be a challenge for us, but that's how you grow. So, and this art is a means to that growth. It comes out of a very pained experience. I know some of the story of Gordon and where his artwork began, and the issues built around that, and that's pretty public knowledge. So it's a challenge, and it comes out of a deep heart place. I could be theological. There's a word that they translate Jesus' grief, and it's like itzmai, which is a lovely word in Greek, and it's a gut-wrenching. It means Jesus was gut-wrenched when he saw this, and that's what this art does too. It's gut-wrenching. I think it must have been gut-wrenching for Gordon putting this together, and your photography is gut-wrenching too. It's a story of such a long struggle of marches and rallies and all sorts of things. So this is gut-wrenching stuff, and that's good. Something we need our gut wrenched.
And I just need to honour you too, Elaine. You've walked with us all of those years, so thank you very much on behalf of our people. You've walked with us.
I think I have to say that in the collection in the museum, we only put 16 of Gordon's paintings in it because we didn't want to overload it. The reason we did it was not to show off the Syron paintings. And we only put my photographs of the dancers in it, which was called A Decade of Dance and the Birth of Bangara. So that group of photographs was in it. My land rights was not in it. We could have added it later, but like we had over 30 of James P. Solomon, who was a Reverend artist and is a Reverend artist and had a bunch of children, and we have over 30 paintings by him. And we have over 30 paintings of a Northern Territory artist called Abraham de Galloway. We have over 30 paintings of Carla Dickens, mixed media artist and winner of a lot of awards, and a wonderful artist, and a truth teller. She is. So we have a lot of artists that we promoted and wanted to, Bondi from Western Australia, over 30 paintings. He came from the place where a rabbit-proof fence was made.
Told you they have a lot of paintings.
Yeah, we have a lot of paintings, over 400 paintings in our collection of other artists. And we have a sculpture collection, a book collection, and a t-shirt collection, and we have a lot of things now that we're going to sell. We just can't keep it anymore, and we had it in storage. And every time that we tried to needed money, we sold some of Gordon's. We have kept that pretty much intact. One interesting group of paintings we have is called Bondi paintings. And Bondi, I've been told by the Northern Territory artists, is a word for the LGBTQI artists. So we have some modern paintings telling a story, and some from the Northern Territory artists that tell stories that they've had for thousands of years. And they created this body of paintings. Abraham de Gallier is one of those, and David Cameron. So we have quite a diverse group of paintings, including the dot paintings like Emily Kingarway and Utopian Artists Group, and we don't have as many dot paintings as we have the urban Aboriginal paintings. That I'd like to also just say one thing, that Gordon always wanted to be called an Aboriginal artist or an Aboriginal person. And he rejected it, and hated it that the government told him he was Indigenous. Because the Indigenous people of the world is a label that talks about the Native Americans or the Mapuche of Chile, or they're Indigenous. And so Gordon said that's something else the government took away from us, is that I was brought up to be called Aboriginal, and I identify with that, and he was angry. And he stood up at conferences and said things about it, but he heard other people also stand up and complain. Why? So that's why, if you look at the book, or I just wanted to explain that one thing, because Gordon's didn't want to talk, and he forgets things a bit now, so I thought I might explain it for him. You agree, Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. It's a label that's been put on us by a foreign power, and it's their language, not ours. So it's not about me. It doesn't identify who I really am. So once you put that label on us, you now have label us into a political story that they want to control.
Well, Aboriginal means original, definite. And weren't the Aboriginal people the first people?
That's what they reckon.
The cave paintings? So Aboriginal came from the word original.
It meant original, yeah.
So,
but like I say, it's used for political purposes. It's not used for my strict and true identity, because I know I'm Kabi from my father's side. I know I'm Gurung. I know where I come from. I know my land and all that, just like Uncle knows, And Biribai here, you can't change that. That's much more permanent and much more historical, much more genealogy. It's in his DNA to be that. And so when you use the term Aboriginal, it takes away all of that and leaves you with nothing but some kind of label that they want to put on you for them to control you.
And you started off on that talking about selling the collection. I'd like to make an appeal if there's someone who's watching this who has the means to frustrate the Land Gordon's idea of selling the collection, of keeping it together, someone with a lot more money than I've got. This would be the opportunity for you to make the most memorable contribution to this country, this society that you can make. Keep this collection together as an essential dialogue point for this country to progress.
And if I would add to that, the institution that I would appeal to would be the church. Because, you know, a lot of their churches now are emptying out, their buildings are still there, and it would be such a simple act of reconciliation, if you want to call it that, but it'd be a simple act of grace to say, well, here's a building, put it all in here, and here's the money to go with it, and the title deed. We've got to have the title deed. That's the key. The title deed. We just don't want a building that we have to rent. We want a building that we can own on our own land to be able to put this in. So, church, whichever denomination, gee, it would be great to put it in St. Mary's, wouldn't it?
It's got to be permanent. Keep it place for the keeping place, the place you keep it.
And hang the gender of God in it.
Yes, amen.
You know, John Mundine was the curator of this show, and Adrian Newstead, and John didn't choose one of the gender of God to put in it because it was a bit too confrontational. So
yeah, no, it's just like I said before, it's
provocative.
It's provocative and political. Yeah, deeply spiritual.
As I say, it's not the art you get to put with your curtain colours.
Well, you know, as you know, I'm an American, and or maybe you guessed if you didn't know.
Never guessed.
But my father was on the Methodist church board, and my Aunt Lillian ran the choir. She did the books for the church, and the whole family was churchgoers. Friday night prayer meeting, you know. So I was brought up so religious, and we didn't have any art in our house, and I didn't grow up with art, or I didn't ever study art history. I learned everything I know from Gordon, really, but we had a picture of Jesus in our house, and it was a sort of a poster of sorts, but it was framed. And I remember asking my mother, why does Jesus look like a black guy? Why is he so dark? And I got a whipping because it was blasphemous. And I think that's the upbringing of a very religious people that, and I was just a child, you know. I think looking back at my upbringing in the South, I certainly knew what racism was, and it might even be one reason that I came here when I was 25 and I stayed here. Australia is a wonderful country. And speaking of immigrants, you know, it's a big topic right now in politics, being voted on everywhere, taking sides. I was a really good immigrant to this country. I know that for sure. I came here as a high school teacher and knew nothing about art, and I paid taxes all those years.
We do appreciate you.
I didn't mean it that way,
No.
but
Yeah. Welcome to country.
I was very fortunate 28 years ago to meet Gordon. 28 years we've been together. But we knew each other a lot longer than that. Almost 20 years. I met him the year he came out of prison. Mum Shirley introduced us to each other, which was, she asked me to drive her and go to meet Gordon, and I remember I took my little tape recorder, I put it down on the table, and I turned it on, and I walked back, and I took a picture of the two of them starting to talk, and then I went out of the room so they could talk. And yeah.
Yeah, she was another mother of ours.
Yeah, Mum Cheryl was a wonderful person. She was, she didn't care about what she was wearing, or she taught me a lot of things to look after yourself. I never will forget, I brought her some vitamins one time, and it was fish oil or some kind of vitamin A, vitamin E capsules. They were great big, quite big. And she bit into it, and she opened it up, and she just spread it all around her face, and she said, "That's really good for your skin." And I went, "Wow, I didn't know that." And I've been doing that ever since.
That's
she told me that.
I must end by telling my story. I had a curator, I guess you want to use a fancy term, the collection of Gordon's work at church. I was just at Bondi in Sydney here. It was just around the corner from here, Chapel by the Sea as it was then. That's another story, which I won't get into. But we had a collection there, this art. I do remember, I don't know what happened to it, that big crocodile on the top of the steps. It was stuffed, it was really stuffed, that crocodile. But we had all sorts of art there. And we had it opened by the former governor of New South Wales, Marie Bashir, who was quite a woman. And they sent me out all these protocol instructions beforehand, because there's all sorts of protocol with the governor, what to call her, and all sorts of things like that. So, and one of them was, and I got caught out on this because she was walking up the steps, and I was pushing the governor over to the right. She turned around and smiled at me, and she knew what I was doing. But one of the protocol instructions was you always walk on the left-hand side of the governor. So I was desperately trying to walk on the left-hand side of the governor. She just turned to me and just laughed and said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about that silly stuff."
And I think also that it's the personal stories, isn't it? Sometimes that make. John has a lot of personal stories, and Reverend Ray, he attends funerals all the time, and he's the People's Reverend in Redfern, and wonderful. And John here at the Chapel by the Sea, which was around the corner, what street was it again?
Roscoe Street.
Yeah, right, the main street of Bondi Beach. Chapel by the Sea was so loved by so many people, but the reason it's no longer there is that John fed all the homeless people in Bondi Beach and probably King's Cross every Saturday. And Gordon and I actually joined that church officially and paid the money to help support his cause and to tell the board there of the Uniting Church that he was a wonderful pastor. And I promise you, we were not very religious at the time. Certainly Gordon wasn't, but he did sign the paper that we would become members of that church. And I remember they closed the church and built a block of apartments instead, and they didn't even replace the pastor. They disagreed with the homeless people coming in, and God knows who else came in as well. I don't know.
Maybe Gordon's art.
yeah, they didn't exactly like the exhibition that we had, even though we had influential people there. I remember Honourable Philip Ruddock came and spoke. Reverend Ray spoke.
And Larissa's husband, we had 2 attorney generals.
Yeah,
Philip Ruddock.
Michael Levrov.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
He was there.
Both sides of politics, one Labor, one
We should have
Liberal.
asked him to speak too.
Yeah, the two former attorney generals.
He just brought Larissa to speak. Yeah, and Honourable Michael Kirby was in the front row. So, yeah. And the crocodile was there as well, with stuffed crocodile. Look, we just really we sold some of the crocodile products, and they each had one of those stickers saying it was, from a farm, but it was mainly for the tourists. And Gordon had a huge sign that said, he created, and it said, crocodiles are more protected than Aboriginal people.
That's right, you had that on.
And somebody swiped that sign. It was a big, it was in Gordon's handwriting.
I forgot that.
He made a new sign now, we've got it. But
One of the phenomena of Indigenous artists, Aboriginal artists, Koori artists.
but Curry just means New South Wales.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's Murray and...
Yeah, Murray. I'm a Murray, actually. I'm from Queensland originally. But our artists, the most fascinating thing, in my observation, is that all this political art, this type of art here you're seeing, came out of the Redfern community, or came through that. And they're the ones who painted this. They didn't do the dot art, they did this art. And that's a story that needs to be researched and told as to how they did that. But it did come out of one of the most important things that we've ever done, And you've worked with these guys, you've walked with them, people like Gary Foley and them, who that message at that time was, what do we want? Land rights. When do we want it? Now. And sadly, we've lost that particular call on our people. We seem to have gone a little bit astray from that. But when you come into this artwork here, like this, that particular call just emerges out of your spirit. What do we want? Land rights. This is what this is about. It's about land rights. Left, right and centre. You can't get away from it. And that's why I'm so thankful that it came here, into Bondi, and that you've brought it back here. Would have been good to have it in a more permanent place where we could always go in there and feel the spirit of that call for land rights. But it's there again, very, very clear in here. That's why I'm saying that artwork is very, very deeply political. It's about land rights.
He's still fighting. I know he started off fighting with a good left and a good right.
You guys
He's
can
still
fight.
fighting harder.
We really had to give up. And I think one of the problems is that the stress was too much for Gordon. It created for him, it was...
Yeah. It's emotionally draining, spiritually draining, mentally draining. I know.
And to pay for the storage all those years too, but I think...
I've made my appeal straight to the camera. Some rich person out there, get this collection, get a place and put it in there. Ray says it can be the church here, it can be the church too, because the church is constantly selling off property. So there's plenty of property to put it in.
Gordon's smiling.
And do it tomorrow.
It's a bit late
Quickly
today.
as possible.
Bit late today.
I think whoever did it would really be a hero, but I think we really have given up and maybe we'll have an auction. And I think maybe we should wind this up with thank you for all the kind words and appreciation and also make sure you go to the Aboriginal Diggers March.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course.
April
25th.
It's coming up. It's
Colour Diggers March.
starts out in Redfern.
And I mean, that's a good point because, one of the things that Uncle Gordy did when we started that march, he just started painting these Aboriginal soldiers all over the world. And this one is from France. And it's telling the stories, all of those stories, of those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander soldiers who never got recognition, never got respect, and we're the only ones who will make that happen.
Paid half rates. They paid half, weren't they?
Ever, yeah.
And then they...
Well, they came back without...
They couldn't go to clubs or RSL, and they came back, like Captain Reg Saunders.
Yeah, well, even my brother who fought in the Vietnam War, when he came back, he wasn't allowed to do RSL himself here in Sydney.
And that was later. Well, Braden's two uncles were in the light horse, and when they came home, they had to hitchhike home. They weren't given train tickets.
Yeah, yeah. That's my grandfather was in the light horse as well. Letter.
Is that true? Your grandfather. That's amazing. I didn't even know that all this time. You don't talk about it very much.
I walk in his shoes with pride.
Because Ray organises it every year. It's a huge, and the first one, I have to say, the first Aboriginal diggers, and give credit to the white people that organised it and promoted it. And you participated in it, but they did do that because, and I remember Adam Hill was a leader in the Redfern community and helped other artists, Cecil Bowden was a real, he shared.
Yeah, it was such an important, still such an important project. We're a long way from getting the recognition of those who fought for this country. And this year, we're looking at the Pacific conflict, the War in the Pacific, because if our soldiers, the colour digger himself, Harold West, and all the other ones who, including what's his name that you just mentioned, Uncle, if they weren't at that particular point in Papua New Guinea, we might be wearing kimonos and talking Japanese at them. That's how close the war came. Well, they bombed Darwin, didn't they?
Yes.
And so here we are today because of the sacrifice of these incredible men and women who fought for this country.
I think one bomb actually hit out at Vaucluse.
It hit here, there's just a park up the road here, I could probably find it, plus they got bombs into Newcastle, the east end of Newcastle, where the only shot in anger at the Japanese submarine was sent off at Fort Scratchley in Newcastle because they could see it. They never saw the ones here. They go right up the harbour following the Manly ferry, but that was another time. But there were bombs lobbed into here, and of course they got as far as bombing raids down to Catherine in the Northern Territory. That was quite regular, right down to there.
Yeah, I was up there at that time, talking to the locals, yeah.
So we should end with this conversation and say thank you, but make sure you go to the Aboriginal Diggers March and support it if you care enough. And what time does it start? And the day and what time?
12 o'clock on the 25th, which is Saturday. Next Saturday, actually.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bring your money if you want.